From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Guys, I think this is the most casual I've ever dressed on the show. I'm going to rationalize it by saying I want to really feel like the common person when we talk about today's subject. But honestly, it's just because I don't...
You talking about that button-up shirt you're wearing? Or
yeah, you're wearing it's sort of a mixed bag you got going on. You got a button-up shirt underneath what appears to be a hoodie, and then with a Singha beer ball cap on, which I love.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I look like I was thinking about this because I went to the store earlier, and I haven't gotten out much unless I'm traveling somewhere off the books. But I saw myself in a mirror, and I said, you know what? I look like those characters at the very beginning of a video game where you just have to collect whatever armor you can find. Yeah. You know,
you also look like the suspicious dude going to the drop point, like in the movie, who's trying to look inconspicuous.
Right. No one will tell. I've got a hoodie and a ball cap, which is the Marvel Universe perfect disguise. Right. We are talking about uncommon people today, though. Fellow conspiracy realists Matt and Noel and I have been thinking about this idea for a while, and we're surprised that it doesn't get a little bit more examination. You'll see why in a second, but let's kick it off this way. Imagine being president. What can you say about presidents in the U.S. and elsewhere that has not already been said? I mean, it's a tough gig. It's one of the few jobs in the world that only one person can have at a time, right? And people spend their entire professional lives slaving away, sometimes doing pretty horrific things with the goal of one day being president of the United States. Not many people make it, less than 50 at the time of this recording. And once you get that job, I'll be honest, it sounds like a job that sucks,
It's all about the residuals, man. They're in it for the long game, for the book deal, for the talk show.
The library.
Oh, yeah, the library is cool, too.
You do get a library, whether or not you survive your term. There's also something to be said about patriotism. People are in it, sure, for power. The job kind of requires a power-seeking personality. But they're also, I would say it's fair that a lot of presidents, hopefully the majority, are ideological. They want to make the country a better place, leave it better than they found it. But it's tough to know people's genuine inner motivations. All we can tell you is that when you become president, it stinks. No matter what you do, a certain percentage of the population is virtually guaranteed to hate you. And the stress being involved with the role of America's top dog is so insane that people have conducted studies trying to figure out whether it biologically ages you at a faster rate, right? So
it certainly appears to.
It certainly appears.
Before and after shots are pretty telling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like somebody just got out of grad school when they go in, and then it looks like they were the single parent of 15 kids for 30 years after they get out in 4 years.
It is a little weird, though, because it is almost like you're courting the entire country when you're running your campaign to become president.
Yes.
And then you become president and then you leave. It's like you're right. It's like you've been in a marriage for 20 years.
You're hitting on 300
American people.
Yeah, you're hitting on 330 million something people at once. And you going into it that this group date is not going to go perfectly. It's tough, right? And there's also an argument that has some validity to it. The old adage that no one who wants to be president should be president, because of all the difficulties involved. It's what's the word from Star Trek? The unwinnable scenario, Kobayashi Maru.
That's the one.
Is that it? Yeah. You're in one of those situations. It's a Gordian knot, and unorthodox solutions are often the only thing you can do to get new results and break the wheel. But a while back, we started asking ourselves, just off air, just hanging out, about the rumors you hear about presidents. You'll hear tales, especially in early America, of drunken carousing in the halls of power, secret meth habits, drugs. This is a drug episode.
Yeah. Really quickly, Ben, what is carousing? Is it like gallivanting? How does one carouse?
Carousing has specifically the idea, it specifically refers to social boozing times. Okay. So like if you're at a happy hour with your friends after work, then you're carousing. You're not necessarily dead drunk. It's just like happy hour, have a beer or two, and then people are making jokes like, I don't know. All of our inside jokes are so weirdly inside.
Revelry.
Right? Yeah, you're reveling. Mm-hmm. You're reveling. It's like a low key reveille. It's not quite as awesome or epic as revel.
You're right. It is specifically tied to booze, whereas I think you can revel without booze.
Yeah. Yeah. I often revel in my terrible mistakes. You know what I mean?
Yes, do we all?
Yeah. So
not yours, our own.
Yes. Well, thank you for that. So this is a drug episode, and it's one that is inherently conspiratorial because we're talking about people who definitely have secrets, people who have many more secrets than the average person, and they live in a world of secrecy, and they are also highly protected. The media and the conversations that are allowed to be conducted about them are more tightly controlled than you might believe. So going into this, knowing all these weird factors, we asked ourselves how many, if any, U.S. presidents had substance abuse problems. Here are the facts. First off, this is a tricky question, and there is no way to know the entire answer.
No. We looked pretty extensively into this, and I will tell you right now, the things we're going to talk about are not fully corroborated in many instances. Some of the little mentions we're going to give to you are things that we saw in a couple places, but it wasn't like there was a book that some writer came through because of a biography and let the public know about some of these things. Because remember, we're talking about 50 individual human beings for all the reasons that you just mentioned, Ben, who are protected, who, life is quiet about them unless it's in some kind of official book written by somebody they paid a lot of money.
Yeah, pretty untouchable for the most part, outside of a handful of big scandals. I mean, the private life of a president is pretty heavily guarded.
Yeah, it reminds me of Watership Down, weirdly enough. Do you guys remember Watership Down? It's the
brain does somehow
with the rabbits and
yes.
the fields of blood. Yeah, that was that wrecked my childhood nice and good.
And that one threw me for a loop too. There's this great mythology in Watership Down about their god character named Frith and how rabbits become rabbits. And the gist of it is very paranoid. It's like the world is out to get you. It's out to kill you. So we know that presidents are kind of like those rabbits in Watership Down. They're the most highly protected people in the world, but they're also target number one for a lot of other rival institutions, a lot of other individuals. And it makes sense that they would be so highly protected. Their image would be so curated, because I was thinking in terms of statistics, you guys. Being president is a very dangerous job in the U.S. 1 of every 9 presidents has been murdered. Since 1865, 1 of every 4 presidents have had attempts on their lives. So that means that you have a 25% chance of someone trying to kill you sometime during your term. And if you look at successful assassinations, we're talking 1 in 5. So presidents have to be protected. And this protection extends, like you were saying, Noel, to the strict secrecy and confidentiality around their inner lives, especially their medical conditions. Anytime someone is possibly going to become president, you'll notice the media spends a lot of ink very carefully reporting stuff about the physicals they have to take, right? And there were even There was a kind of rumor mill that got out of control when former President Donald Trump, I think, was unexpectedly taken to Walter Reed Medical Center on an unscheduled visit because it generates so much concern. This is the guy in charge of the world's wealthiest country.
Not even to mention in the lead up to an election too, right? Like, I mean, we see that becoming a thing too with like Hillary Clinton, for example, where I think she took a stutter step or something like that. And all of a sudden it was big news that she was like on death's door. Obviously that was quite a misogynist narrative as well. That was fed by the media and other candidates, I would argue. But yeah, you're definitely, it can sway things. It can change world events if you're actually president, or if you're in the run up to becoming president, it can sway the election in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And think about it. Do you want, I would think of another analogy here. Think of Warren Buffett. So Warren Buffett is an elder statesman, almost a messianic figure for people in the world of finance. The president of the U.S. is not just in charge of an incredibly wealthy country. They're also in command of one of the most dangerous military on the planet. And with that kind of power at the height of international politics, the president's health becomes kind like people read tea leaves about it. It becomes kind of like the way people try to divine wisdom from Warren Buffett's off the cuff opinions. Like we've talked about it before. I think most recently in our episode on CEOs, if Warren Buffett just goes on the news one day, and he can totally go on whenever he wants. If he goes on the news one day and he says a certain company is good or bad, like if he goes on CNN or what have you, and says pogs are coming back, then the Wall Street will react and like people will invest in pogs. Because it doesn't matter if he's telling the truth. His opinion is just, it has so much weight to it. So if a president, in this comparison, has an illness or a medical condition that goes public, right? Like if it turned out someone had a long-term chronic condition, then global rivals will probably interpret that condition as weakness, as an opportunity to advance their own interests. And domestic rivals will totally do the same on both sides. They'll say like, hey, let's get by both sides. I mean, the Democrat Republican divide, they'll try to strike when that window, if they see a window of opportunity. And that's not the other thing. We talk about drugs. So first, yes, they're going to keep drug use secret because they basically don't want Russia to know. You know what I mean? Like, and that makes sense. But one of the last factors I would add here is that the legal status of various drugs has been in flux over time. This is a young country. It's still figuring stuff out, and it contradicts itself in a lot of laws over time. I think about that a lot.
Oh, I mean, like methamphetamine used to be like super legal and super popular and used heavily in the military. Not to mention, I believe MDMA was even at one point like an experimental military drug. Obviously, we know LSD's checkered history within the government with the MK Ultra and all that, but specifically amphetamines, that was like a military man's drug right there because it got you like kept you from falling asleep on your post, and used fighter pilots a lot like during the World Wars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and you bring up a really good point there, Ben, just about the time factor, the legality factor. One thing that I at least didn't think about as we were researching this story is how at least cannabis and marijuana, how the legality of that shifted and changed, how it became a negative thing. But for a long time, it was accepted and just a part of, again, military culture. It was a part of a lot of other culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because drug legislation, I feel like this is fair to say, drug legislation in the U.S. is as much based on moral panics or performative values as it is on actual concerns for people's safety. But for like the most extreme example, let's take the founding fathers. And we're going to hang out with those dudes in just a bit. But think about this. You can say this conclusively. Absolutely none of the U.S. founding fathers, presidential or otherwise, tried LSD. It's not because they were mad about hallucinogens. It's because LSD literally did not exist at the time. And then when we talk about marijuana, like you say, it was not a big deal. And a lot of stuff modern Americans assume about the early American attitudes of marijuana are totally, totally wrong. It was way less of a big deal in terms of like getting high. They thought that was something French people did. Yeah. Yeah. Several. Yes.
Yeah. Founding fathers, right? I mean, but was it smoked though, or was it more thought of as like something to make strong rope with?
Right. Exactly. And we'll get into that too. Due to these factors, these things we named, the secrecy, the need for protection, the importance of public image, the U.S. public generally does not learn about scandalous or problematic medical shenanigans until way, way, way after the fact, and often through unofficial channels, through like an expose or something. These are the things the presidential library would rather you not know when you visit. So we can confirm, we can't always do this on stuff they don't want you to know, but we can confirm, yes, some presidents did drugs. They did a lot of drugs. They did hard drugs. They partied in a way that would get anybody else arrested. What are we talking about? I'll tell you after a word from our sponsor.